Hey everyone, welcome back to another exciting episode of Breaking the Ceiling, a place where we get to learn about the entrepreneurs behind the big brands. All of us have been hearing the word mock meat. Some of us have tried it, some of us want to try it, and others are wondering what the hell it is. Today, I want to talk to the person who started it all. Please help me in welcoming Abhinav Sinha, the CEO and co-founder of Good Do, the vegan eatery, India's first and largest QSR chain. Welcome to the show, Abhinav.
Thanks a lot, Ashwin. Pleasure to be here.
So, Abhinav, before we start into anything, I want to start with what is mock meat. Let's start with that, then I will dive into a little bit about you. Can we start with what is mock meat?
Sure. So mock meats, as the name suggests, it's something that's looking to create meat. People call it by different names, right? It's you can call it mock meat, faux meat, plant-based meat, alternative meat, and so on and so forth, right? But across the board, you can see the word meat being there. So it's something that is creating the taste, texture, experience of meat, but it doesn't come from an animal, right? So so the source could be varied. It could be from plants. In future, it could be from cells and tissues. But that in essence is mock meat.
Awesome. So that helps clarify a lot of things, and I also got to learn a couple of new ways of referring to the same thing. Awesome. So, Abhinav, tell me a little bit about yourself before Good Do.
Sure. So I did my PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology back in the States, and where I studied proteins, protein chemistry, and the like. I actually used to study the vision system, and I used to study marijuana, which is a good sort of bar chat topic. But and then after my PhD came back to India, I got into the pharma industry, where I worked at Dr. Reddy's in the R&D side of things, making some cancer drugs and the like. Did my MBA from ISB, and thereafter I went back into pharma for a couple of years, working in marketing and strategy at Novartis, and then moved into Good Do, and the whole thing of plant-based meats with some friends and family.
So how does biotechnologists who spend a good amount of time in pharma decide to start mock meat? So what was that transition? What was that journey? What was that aha moment? Hey guys, this is what we want to do.
So there was no real, let's say, one particular aha moment, right? It's sort of something that is, a story in the making, where it started off with us. We come from a family to be crazy about food, and we are actually a family or a community that really eats meat and loves its meat. Having said that, and I too used to enjoy meat, but as a child, me and my brother Abhishek, who's sort of one of the driving forces behind this whole thing, we had ethical qualms about eating meat. We loved the taste of it, but we used to feel bad about that we had to kill an animal to eat it. So every now and then we become vegetarians and then go back to it because our tongues and our taste buds and other things wouldn't draw us to it. So much, but we could never really reconcile the two. When I went to the US, actually for 2 years, I became a vegetarian after seeing some videos of PETA and other things about animal cruelty, which really hit me deep. But again, slowly went back into non-vegetarianism. So that was the essence, that we were meat eaters who were worried and troubled by our love for meat and how it was affecting another being's life, right? And the cruelty meted out of it. When the seed of Good Dog, particularly, or plant-based, our foray into the plant-based space, was somewhere in the middle of 2000s when Abhishek, my brother, he was a chemical engineer by training. I was just starting off my PhD after my biotechnology. He came across a paper from the Netherlands where the Dutch government was putting some money into research into tissue cultured meat. And we discussed as to, what is this whole thing of tissue cultured meat? And as a concept is something that made sense, that you take a small bit of tissue from an animal and grow it up into a large, chunk of meat. It made sense. But at that time, of course, we were much younger. We didn't really know as much. And this much we realized that it was something that was going to take a lot of time, effort, money, expertise, and so on and so forth. Where we couldn't really get into it at that point. We went our own separate ways. He went into the civil services. I went into the sciences, and again, but he was in touch with the whole field. While my PhD per se was focused on protein chemistry, right, which is sort of essentially related to what meat is composed of, which is proteins, right. I came back to India, and I think 2013-14 is when we again started talking about it, looking into it, and guys, we must do something about this. And that was when the whole more plant-based meat alternatives were catching or beginning to sort of start up in the US and elsewhere. That's when we decided that, okay, fine, that when others are doing it, we could also. It was not going to be easy. And that is how the initial work with Good Dot and plant-based meat started, with Abhishek, our very close friend, Deepak, who's a co-founder, and Shruti, our sister, who's a restaurateur and a hotelier with experience across India and Southeast Asia.
That's awesome. So, and how did four of you, so it was you and your brother who was talking about this. So how did other people, sister was maybe obvious, but how did somebody else who's not in the family, how was that? How did that kind of work?
So Deepak has been, close family friend for several years. And in fact, it so happened that Abhishek was an IRS officer, and he was on one side of the story of the table, and Deepak was a CA for a large firm, and they were on opposite sides of the table, right? But then they formed a friendship, and got very close. And Deepak, being a Jain, also committed to the idea of and stuff. So he also wanted to give back to the society and do something beyond, a corporate or money only job. That's how we got together.
That is awesome. So it's just funny how life plays out, right? You never know, like people you've grown up with, you're going to do business with them. What are you going to do with them? So that's a fantastic story.
So something I must say, see how you can sort of fit it in is, actually the role of our parents, actually, when we were growing up, these are things that you don't really sort of realize. There are lots of things that passively diffuse into you, right? My mom, she was daughter of a famed teacher, and she would tell us when we were children as to, you guys, we are not filthy rich or anything, but you've been given a decent enough pedestal and comforts, and ensure that you do something with that, right? Do something beyond yourself. And she would use a phrase which is, in some sense, a little harsh, but it really hit home the point. She would say that apna kutta bhi dekh leta. Even a dog takes care of its own, right? So her thing was do something beyond yourself and be of help to the society and world at large.
I think that is very wise. That is very wise. So our parents land up teaching us so many things which we may not consciously learn or retain. But so much of what they did, sometimes more than what they said, what they did, we land up following them subconsciously, right? And I've seen that with my parents. I've seen that with so many other, of my friends, and how they land up emulating their parents, even if they started out by saying they're not going to do it. They do so many mannerisms, so many way of speaking, so many way of thinking, that has actually been passed on, and which I think is fabulous, right?
Yeah, and when you say about saying versus doing, and my dad, while he was not a person who would talk about lots of things, but then you'd see him, he would take care of rather feed dogs, and every day one of the office, he would take a pack of biscuits, and that was an invariant thing whether we were in Calcutta or Jaipur or wherever else. So yeah, those things really hit home, and that sort of tells us, as we are growing and we are having children and nephews and nieces and of our own, that we are actually looked up to, and we affect them and their thought in direct and indirect ways.
Right. So Abhinav, tell me a little bit about the name. Like, how did Good Dot and Good Do come into being?
That's interesting. So Good Dot is to repeat, the company that manufactures plant-based meats or mock meats, and they develop it. The way it came about is, our logo is a green dot with the letter Good Dot lettered inside. What we inscribed inside what we did was we said how it came about is, of course, in India, we have, packaged food has to have a marking uh, indicating its vegetarian or non-vegetarian origins with a green dot or a red dot, right? Red dot indicating non-veg origin and green meaning plant-based or vegetarian rather, including dairy. So what we said was, let's adopt that green dot, and we are trying to do something that's good through it. We are creating products that are good for us, good for the environment, good for animals, and hence pretty much good for all. So we'll call this dot as a good dot. So that's how good dot was born.
That is, I think, fantastic story as well as such a excellent brand play, right? I just love how that kind of came around.
It was, in that sense, organic, and at this point of time, I guess we can say that it was well thought of. So it came out well. Yeah, it turned out well.
It's always good.
Good Do has a bigger story, or as probably as much of an interesting story. It was in 2017. Good Dot started commercial production in around September 2017. And this was during the pilot stage of the plant around June or July 2017. Abhishek was going to the factory. He crossed a meat shop. He went a little further. Then something inside him stirred. It was on the highway. He made a big detour and came back around. And he stopped at that meat shop and bought all the animals that were there. There were a bunch of chicken and this one goat. And he brought them to the factory. We created a small sanctuary for them outside the factory, in the factory premises. And the goat, the guys in the factory took a major liking to the goat. They would call him by all sorts of names, Pappu, Guddu, this and that. And the name Guddu sort of stuck as a term of endearment, right? This is, of course, Guddu, Guddu, the typical Hindi nickname. About 6 months later, this was June, July. About 6 months later, we thought that, we need to create some kind of an experience center to let people know what exactly mock meat, plant-based meat is, because people would ask us. So we thought we'll come up with a small little food truck and as an experience center. And when it came to naming it, we bounced around lots of names. Then we realized that, now Providence, God, Creator, whatever you want to call it, through us saved this poor creature, this goat, and let's make him our mascot, and let's name this whole enterprise after him. And it initially started off as Good Do's, Gudduz, which then later we realized, well, we are Good Dot, is Good Do, and you can remove the T, becomes Good and Do. So that's how Good Do was born.
Fantastic. So it's so interesting to see how names get created and how they'll end up playing such a big role in how people perceive your brand, right? I mean, I think that's a big part of naming a company is also how people end up, by just hearing the name, they will start, it will create curiosity. It will also give them some insight into what the company does. So I think you guys have done a fantastic job on both those fronts, right? Tell me about some of the challenges that you faced when you started Good Dot and Good Do.
See, the first challenge was, even just realizing where to start. Right? All right, okay, you want to save the world, you want to save the animals, etc., etc. But, how do you make this thing? It is not something that's a generic product that you can just pick a machine from somewhere and straight away start making the best plant-based meat. So it started off as the technical challenge of where do you start, how do you do this thing? And thankfully, we had within the team some exceptional skills, right? Both within the core team of 4 or 5 people and some of the wider team, with Abhishek from a chemical engineering background and Shruti from a culinary background, because she ran award-winning hotels and restaurants herself. Me from a science, deep tech, protein chemistry background, and some other people who had food production background and a deep expertise in that. We could come up and start off somewhere. That was very critical as to where do you start that up from. The second aspect was what we want to do with Good Dot and Good Do is not create niche products that are, available to the super wealthy, the creamy layer, and so on. Of course, those are people who are, very actively engaged with us and they love our products. So that's great. But we wanted to make an impact. So it had to be a mass product which would be adopted widely. And hence price is very important.
Correct.
So focusing on how to get the price and costs low for a deep tech product with significant R&D sort of time and cost expenditures was critical. Third aspect was we needed to create products that were ambient stable, because in India, cold chain, still is very fractured. Right? And if we wanted to get products to places around the country, that would have made life very, very difficult, not to, talk about the cost and the environmental footprint and other things. So ensuring the technical aspects of shelf stability, that would be. And of course, for like any startup, the capital, but that was not as difficult, thankfully. People did come in and help.
I think whenever I talk to startups, so I've been an angel investor in the past, and till today, talking to almost 2 to 3 startups a day, I always jump right into funding. Even I'm not funding them, I always want to understand how are you planning your funds. And you will be surprised how little time people spend on it. People obsess with the idea and they completely forget that, hey, to make this idea real, you need to have funds, you need to plan your funds properly, how much you do to R&D, how much you spend on marketing, how much you spend on operations. But was that a very large problem, and how did you all kind of work through it? Like, did you all bootstrap? Did you all raise something? How did you all, because it's a deep tech product, right? It's going to require a lot.
To be honest, we initially thought of, starting fairly small, like most startups. And, the way things panned out, we got a interest and partnership opportunity with a major distribution channel called RCM. They are, they have 7,500 plus stores around the country, 2 million active sales agents and others. So there was no opportunity for us to really think about starting small. So we had to start at a medium scale to begin with. And that, of course, requires CapEx. And that was where, thankfully, both Deepak and Abhishek had a wide enough network of, HNIs, UHNIs, and of course, friends and family from all our connects, where we could, source significant funds early on, which I don't think, happens very easily for first-time entrepreneurs. Right? Of course, Deepak was not a first-time entrepreneur, nor was Shruti, but still, in this space, it was a very new thing. But thanks to their contacts, that was done, and Deepak brings great, financial acumen. So that part was taken care primarily by him and Abhishek, to be honest.
That is awesome. So during all this journey, like till date, can you think of a proud moment where you've been really proud of yourself and the team and the organization?
To be honest, it is, we are in a, very front-facing sort of a company, right? With a consumer retail, we've got outlets. So it happens surprisingly, a lot more often than I had expected. When literally every time a customer who walks into a Gooddo outlet and says, they are very, very told them about it, or a friend has dragged them, they're non-vegetarians in many cases, and they're like, yeah, ye sab nahi hoga yaar, soya hoya bahut khaya, right? And then they come out and, they try, because we give samples at our outlets, that is at each one of those is a fantastic experience for us and our team to see people change their mindset, like literally like that. So that is a very, that tells us about, the product, what we're doing, it matters, it can make difference, and people's consumption habits can change because of this. And something a little more, let's say, at a bigger level was in 2018, there's an event called the Parliament of World Religions. Right? This is the largest religious leaders anywhere in the world. It happens once every 20 years or so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's a massive thing. The first one was in 1893 in Chicago. And that's where Swami Vivekananda gave his Chicago address.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Exactly. And then in 2018 was the seventh one.
Oh, wow.
Of course, you can imagine different religions, people coming in from different parts of the world.
Right.
They said that, while all religions we talk about love and compassion, we primarily look at it from a human-centric approach.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But of course, we live on a planet, and the planet has to survive, and there are other creatures in it. We said, let's expand the circle of compassion to include the whole planet. And to that effect, they said, why don't we have a vegan banquet?
Okay.
Of course, as you can imagine, many religions you don't really particularly care about veganism per se.
Correct.
So they were worried about what they're going to eat and stuff. So they said this category of plant-based meats has been making some sound. Why don't we try it out? And they tested certain several global products, and unbeknownst to us, a well-wisher of ours and a friend, he sent our products, and they actually chose our product over several other counterparts. And a celebrity chef created an entire banquet out of it, and the entire event rather. So much so, and people there absolutely, and so much so they invited Abhishek up to the podium to address the entire audience, right? So that was phenomenal, for all of us. It was a huge move.
Oh, that was absolutely like it was literally, for a lack of a better, an opportunity of a lifetime. I mean, once in 20 years, like, again, you probably may see it again after 20 years, but I think there's literally an opportunity of a lifetime, right? So that was phenomenal. That's a big, big, big victory, a big proud moment. And also now the small proud moments, right? The proud moments every day, not to take away from this, but that was actually a national scale, international scale, fantastic.
At that point, we've been in commercial operation for 15 months or so, right? So, so it was good validation, as well.
No, absolutely. No, so when you have a good product, I think it'll speak for itself. Literally, like, you didn't go and sell it, right? The product spoke for itself. So I'm going to use this as an example in my future talks on how products speak for itself. So tomorrow I have a talk with Niti Aayog and an incubator. I'm going to use this as an example of how products should be speaking for themselves, right? So it's a fantastic example. And my learning of my day. Anyways, so coming to the next thing, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self? Like 3 pieces of advice. If you could go back to your 18-year-old self and tell him 3 things, like these are 3 things you need to do or learn, what would they be?
That's interesting. I guess the first one would be don't worry about calculus. Yeah. The second one would be try not to worry too much about where you're going to land up, how you're going to get there, right? Because any plan that you would have, right, would fall by the wayside. Most of them, even the best laid out plans don't work out. But third would be stay focused on sort of think about the bigger picture, right? Because what you want your life to be, and start thinking early, because that will matter so much more than anything.
Very good. I love the first one. Calculus is not important. I love that. So I do this very weird thing, or maybe I just started doing this very weird thing. On my kid's birthday, I interview them. So my 6-year-old actually started this trend, right? So on the 6th birthday, she was like, hey, you're doing this, breaking the ceiling. So I discuss work at home, right? So they know that I'm doing this show. And my 6-year-old and her birthday just went by recently. So she said, like, hey, you interview everybody. Why don't you interview me? So I said, sure. I pretended to do an interview with her. And I said, what do you want? I'm like, okay, what should I ask you? What do you know? So she thought for a couple of minutes, and then she's like, I'm 6. So how about you ask me 6 things that I have learned in my life? I was like, that's a very mature thought for a 6-year-old, but nonetheless, let's start with that. And she actually told me 6 things, and I shared this as I use Notion, right? So I put this in Notion, and I shared this on LinkedIn. I think it's still my most commented on post ever, right? It was so insightful for a 6-year-old to think these things. Many people are like, oh, you're raising a strong daughter and she's so forward thinking, admission, happy birthday, this, that, and the other. So my son felt very jealous. So they also once in a day, I'll sit on LinkedIn at night, right? So they also kind of huddle around me in the iPad and they see what I'm doing. And so my son was like, what the hell? When are you going to interview me? I want to talk about 9 things. And he's actually a national level chess player. So he's way more accomplished, but he felt very out of spot. But I love the fact that I'm gonna share this with him at some point, maybe after calculus is done. That hey, calculus is not important.
Yeah, there's a very interesting. I mean, sort of an anecdote regarding things not really working out the way you planned. So when I was in ninth and 10th and 11th, I was like, all right, 9th, 10th, pe like biology, bye bye, right? I can't deal with you. I can't draw onion rings and cells. मेरे से नहीं होता, right? So I said, okay, no biology. And 11th and 12th, I realized कि okay, I really enjoy maths and physics. Chemistry isn't really my cup of tea. It's okay, fine, right? And it so happened that my whole plan was, okay, I'm just gonna 12th ke baad, I'm going to study physics in St. Stephen's, New Delhi, right? I was like, Stephen's jana hai, physics padhna hai. And I actually thankfully I got in there, right? I even started studying, and Abhishek, he was across the road in Hindu studying chemistry, right? Hindu college chemistry. What happened was on his first day of college, which was after a month after mine, he was ragged on the streets, and it really got out of hand. It got violent and all that, and he had to leave the whole thing because my parents were concerned because he it was not a nice scene. My parents were concerned. They pulled him out. They said, we're not risking it. And thereafter, actually, there was a form which Abhishek wanted to study engineering and stuff. So they got form for this biotechnology thing, which neither Abhishek or I were biology students, right? So this uncle who was leaving the house, just literally wearing his shoes, he's like, "Oh, अपने बच्चों के लिए biotech का form मंगवाया क्या?" They was like, "No, they are not biology students." This uncle standing at the doorway, he's saying, नहीं अभी वो human genome sequence हुआ, it's a massive thing, it's going to make a difference. Apply करने दो, ये engineering discipline है. They got the form for him. The last day of the filling the form, he says, I can't do. I don't want to do. I don't want to do biotechnology. मैंने भरना. Then my dad literally, I remember saying, अच्छा, why don't you fill it? I said, I don't want to do engineering. मेरे को physics पढ़ना है. My dad says, यार 600 रुपया waste हो जाएगा. Right?
Oh my God.
Right? And I was, said, क्या ठीक है, अभी भर दो, exam मत लिखना. I filled the thing. About 2 months later, exam का date आता है. My dad's like, अच्छा exam कल है, चलो. I think board खत्म हो गया. I've been, just playing games and sports. मैंने कुछ prepare वगैरह नहीं किया. Why should I do it? He again he says, अरे 600 रुपया waste हो जाएगा. So I wrote. Unfortunately, got in. And because my brother had left Hindu, they got worried about me. They pulled me out of Stephens and sent me to study biotechnology. And I was not really a biology person. I didn't enjoy it. I went there, and thereafter it so happened that I ended up, developed an interest in a certain part of that, and ended up having a PhD in biochemistry. There's a guy who did not study biology, did not want to study biology, did not like chemistry, has a PhD in that. And of course, that has, somehow helped here as well. So, things really, you don't really know how things pan out.
100%. So many people who I know who are, ahead in their field don't have the basic education in that field. Very rarely will I see people, who have education in that field doing well. Like, so for example, Dr. Velumani is one of them. He's the MD of Thyrocare, or now the creator of Thyrocare. He's one of my mentors. So he actually studied, in that field. He did his work in BRC and he learned so much, and then he was able to apply it, right? So some of the stuff you studied, obviously, it's helping you here. But in so many different fields, I've seen people nothing to do with that field and they're doing excellent in that field, right? So you never know what you plan and where you end up, right? And as long as you enjoy the journey, I think it's all worth it at the end, right? So tell me a little bit about your work-life balance. What do you do to relax? How much time is work? How much time is personal life? Tell me a little bit about that.
It's still, we are in a very early stage startup as yet, right? So, work, and because, my brother is involved, my sister is involved, and, we all, in fact, in the early days, our kitchen was, one of the major hubs for experimentation. So, my mom, my dad, they were all involved. So, work was, home was, there was not much of a difference initially. Now, I'd like to, talk about the work life, or the way I think about it is, work and life don't have to be different, right? When to be honest, if you're passionate about something, if you're really enjoying what you're doing, and it makes a difference to you and those around you, then uh, just because you're working more hours doesn't mean your life is affected adversely,
Both
right?
life and life.
Indicated, of course, right? They're very well correlated. But thankfully, from that point of view, my wife has been very understanding, right? She's been like, "Acha, theek hai, take some years and do this." And she is also a biotechnologist, so she understands, and she has a major interest in food, so she chimes in. Bhabi has an interest, she chimes in. So we are all in that sense connected. But on a day-to-day basis, I try to, which I mostly fail at, but I try to spend some time. I love spirituality, so I try to spend time reading or listening to spiritual stuff. I like running, so I run, not as frequent as I would want to. Yeah, but I really enjoy working out. Hopefully, I think there were certain times during this COVID period that I was very active and I was doing everything. Then it falls off. So I think I need to get better at that, in ensuring that other things also happen. But yeah, not too worried about it, and that would be something that I'd like to tell your listeners as well. Again, focus and try to find something that really gives you a purpose that you enjoy doing. And while of course physical health and other things is important, but once you get that, once you find that one or two things that you really enjoy, then work and life, they don't have to be two different entities per se.
So while you're saying that, it reminded me of what my dad used to say. He's like, if you love the work you do, you never work a day in your life, right? And so early on, when early days of Equinox, I used to do 14-hour days, maybe even 16-hour days at times. And all my friends were like, are you crazy? Why are you burning out? And, you can just quit and you can just go back to other things and so on and so forth. But that never, I used to never look at it as work because I loved what I did, right? I knew the bigger purpose. I knew what I was working on. I wasn't feeling burnt out. I wasn't feeling as tired or I can't, go on anymore. I wasn't, artificially pushing myself to, something. I felt, hey, I had to do this because I want to get there faster, right? And as long as you don't feel pressure or you don't feel that this, at the end of the day, if you feel it's not worth it, that's actually stress, right? So I think Robin Sharma has a way of saying it. He's like, at the end of it, if you feel stress, means you have not found your purpose. But at the end of it, if you're working on something of purpose, you will not feel stress, right? You will feel joy. You will, it's like, hey, it's worth what you've been, what you've put in.
Jordan Peterson. So I listened to him a fair bit, and he was quoting Nietzsche in one of his talks. And what it says was, I probably won't get it exactly right. He who has a why can endure almost any how.
2 days ago, I read the exact same quote. It resonated a lot with me. And I think I even told my son and daughter about it. And yeah, so it's very weird how I tell a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old about quotes from Nietzsche and so many other people. Many people find it very weird, but quotes are a very large source of my inspiration. They're a very large part of my life because I feel they're able to encapsulate motivation, inspiration in a single little frame, right? Just one sentence can change people's mindsets, and it has done it for me hundreds of times. So anytime I feel down, I have like 1,000 quotes on my phone. I'll just go through a few of them, and they're like a source of energy for me, right? So even the things I share on social platforms is literally quotes. That's the only thing I share on social platforms, right? And that's been fantastic. So, tell me a little bit about role of mentors in your life.
So, in the formal sense of the word mentor, right? I don't think I have a professional and a personal mentor who guide me through X, Y, or Z. But there are people who sort of have influenced me very positively in big and small ways. One of them, I think, a huge one is my mom, who was just from the point of view of about the purpose part, being sort of dedicated, focused on what you're doing, and sees that certain things around how to people who you work with, and who you deal with, how you connect with people. Those are things that very soft, so-called soft skills. But they are. I mean, as you know, if you ask me to go and make any dish at my outlet, the customer will probably run away. There are and to be honest, I again learn a fair bit from Abhishek as well. There are my PhD advisor. He was trained by Hargobind Khorana, the Nobel laureate, and few sort of key quotes that he would repeat often. And so like one of them was, dude, Avi, you need to own the means of production. Here I'm in an academic lab, I'm doing research. What do you mean by means of production? So we used to work on proteins that we had to purify, and they were extremely painful things to do. And many of us would be like, why don't we get it from someone? Like, no, dude, you got to own the means of production. And once you got that, you'd realize that people from around the world are coming to you saying, let's collaborate because you've done the tough part. So you'd say, the other thing you would say is, find something tough that you can do that others can't or won't do, right? So the people like that and quotes like that really helps. I do pick up. I cannot call it a mentor, but I learn a lot from Jordan Peterson and the stuff that he says, and there are other people like that. On a formal setting, I think that's something I should probably work on, and find some people who can guide me better on certain things that I'm not very good at, or structure my life and better.
What I've learned is mentors are people that you can choose, right? Like they may not naturally be in your current course of life, but you can literally find people that inspire you, motivate you, and reach out to them for help. And you'll be very surprised how quickly they say yes. Because when people reach a certain epitome of success, they find this moral obligation on their shoulder that I have to give back. It's a moral obligation. Now, no other obligations are a moral obligation. So it's surprising how many people will go out of their way to kind of help you, mentor you, whatever you want. So, for example, one of my mentors is in his 20s, while one of my mentors is far in his 80s, and everyone in between. So, when I tell people like one of my mentors is 20, they're like, really? Like, bache se advice de raha hai? But the bache knows some things about something that I don't know, right? And so for every different aspect of the life where I feel I can develop strength, I have somebody for social media. She's a social media guru. She has like millions of followers. She will take time out to help me scale mine. And how do you use it to kind of grow your business, right? How do you use it to create a bigger circle of influence, right? So it's fantastic so that you don't have to struggle through all of it yourself. Somebody can just kind of come in and, demystify something for you within 2 minutes, where you would have taken 2 years and still not cracked it, right? So that's where I've seen mentors kind of, helping out. So that kind of brings me to my last question, which is somebody new entering the field of food or food tech. What is the one piece of advice you would leave them with?
I would say, see, with respect to food, if you're making anything, doing and creating anything that goes into a food or a food product, taste, right? Focus on that, forget everything else. If you have a product that people find it difficult to eat, you're probably going to find it difficult to sell, right? And the second on a more generic level is, again, be very clear. What is it that you want to do with your product? What is it? Its USP. With that USP, who are you looking to target? That fitment is very, very critical. If you're making a product X and keeping in mind a target audience Y, but the product doesn't really appeal to them, you are screwed. So focus on those two things very, very critically.
So many times what I have seen, and I've made this mistake myself, we create an isolation, right? While you can ideate in isolation, I think you have to validate in public. You have to go meet the audience that you want to serve, that you have in your mind. At least meet 100 of these people. And then you will get that real feedback of like, hey, is this something that's going to work, not going to work? So before people go and invest millions on things, many of them forget sometimes a very initial step. And many people have taken this step. It even could be something new, right? Like you probably didn't have an audience for mock meat. Like, you don't have like, oh, let me go talk to 100 mock meat lovers. There was no mock meat lovers before you in India, right? So figuring that out, I think would have been fantastic. So, Abhinav, thank you so much for taking out your time, sharing so generously, sharing a lot of anecdotes, from your past, which were fantastic. So I think those stories will stay way longer than other flagship figures. I think stories stay longer with people. So thank you, Abhinav, for taking out the time. You've been a leader in the field of food tech. You have created an iconic brand. As an organization, you all are marching forward. And I'm looking forward to seeing Good Dot and Good Do achieve new heights. And if there's anything me or Equinox can do for you, please let us know. We'll be happy to help you scale to bigger heights.
Much it was absolute pleasures. You generally don't get to have these kind of chats very often. So
that's the reason. That's the reason we do this, right? I mean, when do otherwise in a busy day we never get to talk. This week we normally we would sit, we would discuss business, we would discuss that idea, we go different ways. But that's one of the reasons I created this, right? Getting a little more offline, if you want to call it that, right? And get to know the people behind brands. So thank you, Abhinav. Thank you for taking out the time. So everyone, that was Abhinav Sinha from Good Dot, and he shared so generously with us. I'm hoping that all of you have taken at least one thing back. And what I have taken back is the passion that he carries for his product, for the cause that he's working on. That's what I've taken back, and such an infectious passion. I'm definitely going to be evaluating my choices of meat going forward. And stay tuned for the next episode. We have somebody very interesting coming up next week. Stay tuned for that. Thanks a lot and have a great day ahead.